Alrighty guys, we're winding down absolutism here. We finished up with Europe yesterday. Today we're going to do the great Mughal dynasty in India and then move on to the Ottoman Empire in Turkey. So we have our Western monarchs. You know, the Stuart dynasty in England, the Habsburgs in Spain, Louis XIV in France, and Peter the Great in Russia. At nearly the same time, in Asia, we have other absolute monarchs and even dynasties. And so that is the theme, where you've got this absolutist idea going on all over the world, 15, 16, and 1700s. So you're looking at from the age of exploration through the Enlightenment. The gunpowder empires are growing, of which we have several of them right here. So this is just a heyday where everything begins to come together. Transatlantic trade and the age of absolutism, which is fueled, at least in Europe, by that trade. And so in India, we have the great Mughal dynasties. And my man here, Akbar the Great, you guys know I like Akbar. And they are descendants of the half-Mongol, half-Turkish Muslim Tamerlane, or Timur the Lame, because he had a gimpy leg, who comes across, southern Asia, leaving that wake of pestilence and death and destruction. And the dynasty is going to be well established in the early 1500s, around 1525, 1526, and they're in the northern part of India. And for a small time, they are able to bind together the fragmentation and the division that had plagued India. Remember, the subcontinent of India in South Asia is just so crazy big. A lot of linguistic and ethnic and religious diversity, and along with the geographical barriers, it was hard to unify India. But the Mughals are going to be able to do that. And specifically, we're going to talk about the great leader Akbar the Great. Now, he is a descendant of a guy named Baybars. And Baybars is going to found the Mughal dynasty in Delhi. And early on, the Mughals were able to play, the Hindu and Islamic Indians off of each other and gain ground. Well, Akbar is descended from Baybars, and he is the greatest ruler in all of the Mughal dynasty, like Peter the Great is the greatest ruler of the Romanovs. So he is going to reign, like all the good guys, for quite a long time, from 1556 to 1605. So think of him as a contemporary with Philip II over in Spain. And during this time, India is fueled by trade, all right? Whether it's the Indian Ocean trade or the overland Silk Road trade, Akbar is as powerful, if not more so, than any other absolute monarch. One of Akbar's descendants, Shah Jahan, is going to be considered the richest guy in the world. And Akbar, like most others, starts out as a conqueror, as a warrior. So he expands his empire. But it was after his conquering where he is most well known. After he's done conquering, he figures out, kind of similar to Pachacuti over in the Incan Empire, how to govern it, how to run this empire. And he is devoted to, and his goal is to prevent honest, good government, all right? Like, Oshaka, an Indian ruler from way back in the Maurya dynasty, Gupta dynasty era, way back in the classical age, with Greece and Rome, he wants to provide honest, good government. And his goal is to find a way to work with a tremendous diversity of his empire. So Akbar is a strong central monarch, right? I am the guy in charge, and I'm going to make all the decisions at the national level. Very similar to our man Louis XIV. So he creates this national government of which he was the center. but he also goes out and reorganizes the provincial governments way out in the territories. He wants things to be efficient, smooth, and as fair as possible. So he orders a census to be taken. He wants to find out where most people live, where are the large population centers, and who consumes a lot of resources. He also wants a land survey. Which land is the most productive when it comes to farming, and which areas struggle? If you produce more, or if you consume more, you've got to pay a little bit more in taxes. And this helps Akbar to balance things. If there is a region that experiences drought or famine or flood, he can lower their taxes a little bit until they are, back on their feet. Very similar to what William the Conqueror does in his Doomsday Book. Going back to Augustus Caesar, your best rulers do this. So he decides, like New York City, if you consume more resources than our town of Chapel Hill, things are going to be more expensive. And he also, very different than Louis XIV, removes the special tax on non-believers. Where Louis revoked the Edict of Nantes, Akbar says, no, there's going to be no extra tax for people who are not Muslim. And he goes so far as marrying a native Hindu princess, or hoping to bind the two distinct religions and ethnic groups of India together. He also appoints Hindu practitioners to high governmental posts. Under his predecessors, those were reserved only for Muslims. And what I think is Akbar's greatest accomplishment is he gathers representatives from different religions. Maybe they were traders on the Silk Road or the Indian Ocean trade, but he gets Hindus, he gets Buddhists, he gets Confucian scholars, he gets Islamic imam and ulama, he gets Christian, Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox bishops and priests, and he sits them down. It's a famous painting where they're in a room, they're sitting on their pillows, they're having tea, and he says, okay, what I want to do is I want to look at more of what we have in common than what separates us. You, Rabbi, you have the 10 Commandments, and you, Buddhist monk, you have the Eightfold Path. And Hinduism, thou shouldn't kill and thou shouldn't steal, and over here with the Hebrews and the Christians. So let's look at more what we have in common than what we have that are different. Because to be a good person in any religion, the premise is pretty much the same. And so his empire welcomes outsiders. There's thriving, exchange, trading with Africa, with Europe, with Asia, and things are great. And as a result, India becomes very wealthy. It is also one of the gunpowder empires. So, they are also dealing with the Safavids in Iran, but the Mughal dynasty is very strong. Problem is, in 1605, Akbar dies. And he is one of those uncanny Jedi who have a vision into the future, and they know, this action will reciprocate in the future. When he dies, all of his ideas of unification go with him. Because he reigned for a long time, once again, people just let him do it. People let him manage things. And when he dies, all of those ideas, unfortunately, go with him. And the Mughal dynasty is about to come to an end. So Akbar was that golden age, very similar to Philip II over in Spain. None of Akbar's successors had his vision, his ability, his far-sightedness, and his tolerance. Maintaining an empire as large as Mughal India, all right, you need to be, fiscally responsible, and you need some creative, I hate this term, but it applies here, out-of-the-box thinking. His descendants were once again, an oops-a-daisy, happy, fat, and lazy. They had exorbitant amounts of money coming in. So they began to spend money on building projects, exactly like the Spanish. they get into several wars, especially with the Safavids and others, that begin to erode their solid financial base. They're at war, they're doing big building projects. And stupidly, they withdraw some of Akbar's tax reforms. So when they need money, they begin to go to people who are non-Islamic, erasing all of that goodwill and creating tension where it didn't need to exist. And then one of Akbar's descendants, a guy named Jahangir, will allow the British to build some trading ports and build warehouses on the coast of India. And once the British set their claws into you, if you remember, imperialism, they will slowly increase their power. They were master manipulators, getting Hindus and Muslims to fight, and then the British would step in when they were both tired and bleeding, come in and take over. And the last Mughal emperor, Shah Jahan, literally was the richest man in the world. Silver coming over from the Patesi silver mine in Peru. He had like basketball size, like rubies as decorations in his palaces. But he wants to build a mausoleum for his dead wife. And directly across the stream from it, he was building a one out of black marble for himself. These building projects cost a lot of money. Shah Jahan also tried to expand the empire, more territory, more tax money, but he was unsuccessful. So his wars and his building projects, bankrupt the great Mughal Empire. And so next in Asia, we're going to go to that key area of Turkey, another one of the gunpowder empires that will kind of span, and the Ottoman Empire will span southern Europe, the Middle East, and deeper into Asia and parts of North Africa. And so the Ottomans are going to start out a little bit earlier, in the 1450s, one of the three great gunpowder empires. Now, I rank the Ottomans as the most powerful of the gunpowder empires because they had a lot of territory. It was multi-continental, multicultural, and they lasted for a long time. And the two big primetime emperors we're going to talk about is one, Mehmed II, and Suleiman the Magnificent. These are the two big absolute rulers in Ottoman Turkey. Now, Mehmed is also known as the Conqueror because he begins the Ottoman conquest. And he's going to reign from 1451 to 1481. He gets a lot of attention because he is the guy who, after 800 years almost of knocking on the door of Constantinople, it is Mehmed who is able to capture the Byzantine stronghold of Constantinople, and he renames it Istanbul in 1453. He is also able to go out into the Turkish area and decrease the power of the old tribal chieftains. It was the head of the family that was the most powerful. He says we've got to end the old tribal disconnectedness, but we've got to unify under one massive empire. So he replaces the old tribal chieftains with his royal servants, military guys. We have Mehmed, who is the general, colonel, major, captain, first lieutenant, second lieutenant. So he is on them, making sure that they do what he wants as a part of a unified empire. These are military guys who know how Mehmed thinks. They know how he wants things done. There's a chain of command. If the first lieutenant can't get to it, he goes to his captain. The captain can't handle it, he goes to the major until it goes up the efficient food chain to Mehmed and back down. And he's got this really cool, snazzy kind of onion dome hat. And so the Ottomans are going to rename Constantinople Istanbul. And Mehmed now is in this key spot. He has access to a lot of trade. He has access to southeastern Europe, but also across the Mediterranean. Sticking out in the Mediterranean is Italy. And there's the different Italian trading states like Venice, like Berea, like Naples and Sicily. So there's access to the Mediterranean trade route as well. So he is in this key location. And he controls an overland route of the Silk Road and a waterway route with the Mediterranean. And so now that Mayhead is established, he wants to create efficiency. So he creates a new law book known as the Kunami. And the Kunami is just a set of rules, how he wants things to get done. So you know what is good and what is right and what is correct and what is bad and what the punishments are. And the Kunami is also going to take the ulama. Remember, they are the Islamic bishops, the learned scholars, and they place them under the Sultan's control. Very much like Peter the Great controlling the church with the synod in Russia, that's what Mayhead does. And the Kunami is going to be an extension of the Sharia. It governs all aspects of Ottoman life: social life, political life, commercial life. All right, it kind of gauges your behavior and tells you what is right and what is wrong. And so the empire really starts going. It's picking up steam. Mayhead has laid the foundation, and shortly after him we get Suleiman the Magnificent. And Suleiman will inherit. He doesn't create from scratch this very, very powerful empire. And he wants to extend that, all right? You know, Mayhead was a conqueror. You got to be a conqueror. So he wants to make it a strong Asian as well as a European empire. So it is bicontinental, and you might say tricontinental, with a little bit of holdup in North Africa. And so Suleiman decides that the way to maintain and spread his power is having a strong army. So he puts a lot of time and money and effort into training and weaponry. And so at this time, the Ottoman military power is probably second to none, even more powerful than the European monarchs of his time. Suleiman was a boss, I guess you guys would say in your teenage vernacular. And so another similarity that Suleiman is going to have is going to be like Peter the Great, the strong military, but also how he organizes his empire. Peter the Great had the table of ranks. Well, Suleiman also gets rid of the old nobility, and much like Mayhead, replaces that under a military ranking system. Your status, your privileges increased with your military rank. Your military rank was synonymous with your power and prestige in society. However, and this is interesting, something that will also happen in Tokugawa, Japan, the higher your rank, the more responsibility, the stricter the discipline. It's the Spider-Man philosophy. With more power comes greater responsibility. So as you moved up, according to Suleiman, you were supposed to know better. You were expected to know better, to do better. So punishments were harsher for those of a higher rank if they screwed up. So that is kind of like, you know, when your parents leave you to watch your little brother and sister. All right, you know, Ben and Wesley are supposed to watch Caleb. You know, Caleb, screws up and throws a ball in the house and shatters the window. Well, Caleb doesn't get in trouble, but Ben and Wesley do because they were supposed to be watching him, and he is supposed to know better. And so Pastor Benji is really upset at Wesley and Ben, and Caleb gets off scot-free. Not really, but you get my point. All right. So Suleiman has an even cooler hat than Mayhead. Whoop, there it is. So anyway. So, now Suleiman, much like the other monarchs, wants to have a small functional bureaucracy, just 3 or 4 cabinet ministers that he can focus on, spend hours with each day, and that allows him to make the hands-on decisions for the whole empire. So one of the ministers was the head of the palace and court. Remember, the court are Suleiman's advisors. They live in and around the palace with him, so everything had to be efficient. So the minister was kind of like the president's chief of staff, all right, the guy who gets everything done. Then there is an administrative branch. Guys who are going to know what the law is and make sure they are being efficiently carried out. So there's the head administrator. Then there's the military. We got to have a Secretary of Defense for, to take care of the Army and the Navy. And then, very interesting, like I said with Peter, there is the Minister of Religion of the mosques, the Islamic churches, and the madrasas, the Islamic universities. All right, so we got palace and court, an administrative wing, Secretary of Defense, and the Secretary of Religion. Those are the four ministries, a hallmark of all absolute monarchs. And Suleiman, much like Peter, begins to dominate the religious institutions that were in his empire. And all the religious clergy, from the imams to the ulama, they were all part of his government. They had to follow Suleiman's religious authority. This is what you are going to do. You are going to give the message that I want you to give. And what this does is it allows Suleiman to control everything, what was taught from the local village schools on up through the giant madrasas, the universities of his empire. Everybody is getting a unified message. So in the church service, so to speak, Suleiman would say what passages of the Quran he wants read. Oh, excuse me. All right. Too many almonds before I came out. So, with the ulama working for him, the religious message is structured. And what Suleiman wanted to do was kind of up the kunami. He was committed to maintaining a Sharia that was written as close to what Muhammad wanted done was possible. And Suleiman says, I'm not trying to be heavy-handed. I'm not trying to be total dictatorial, even though I am a king. But he said, I want the Sharia and the Kunami to be a gift of the people. I want our laws to be known, to be public. I don't want to react. I don't want to have somebody commit a crime and then make up a punishment. My goal is to have something that is preventative and functional. You know what is right and what is wrong beforehand. You know what the rewards for doing right are, and you know what the punishments for doing them will be. So if everybody knows what is right and what is wrong and everybody follows it, there won't be any problems. It's preventative and it's functional. It's not reactionary. You can't say you didn't know because it's written right here. And so preventing problems and getting ahead of them is one of the things that allows the Ottoman Empire to go on for a long time and what allows Suleiman's monarchy to be so great. Let's try and look out for problems before we experience them and have a plan of how to deal with them. Looking at the coronavirus with AP World, the College Board is freaking out how to give you guys an exam. We had to shut down school within a week, transition, and I'm out here filming lessons in my garage. So now everyone is trying to figure out how to plan for it next year if we get a relapse. Well, that's exactly what Suleiman meant by this. Kind of a weird, kind of off the top of my head example. I hope it works. So, here's where the Ottomans are a little different. We talked about how Akbar's descendants were meatheads. Same thing with Peter the Great. Same thing with Louis the 14th and even the Habsburgs in Spain. Well, the Ottomans focused on training leaders from a very young age. It's just a little bit hardcore. The son of the emperor, when they were old enough, were taken out. They were educated, and they were sent to govern a small village. They learned how to deal with problems, how to budget, how to punish criminals, how to make decisions. And as they got older, they moved up to larger town and larger town and larger town and even city and region. The job was to get hands-on leadership experience, to figure out who could do it and who couldn't. And when it was all done, when the Sultan Emperor was dying or was dead, because the Ottoman Empire is a theocracy governed by religion, it is Allah, divine right, who picks the next leader. While the brothers had to engage in what I call the Hunger Games or Survivor, to outwit, outplay, and outlast. They had to plan the assassinations, traps, whatever, or assassinate their brothers. And the last brother standing was going to be the new sultan. It was the policy known as fratricide, killing your brother. Now this is crazy, but for the Ottomans it worked and allows them to maintain their empire for 600 years. So, to keep their army strong, the Ottomans built this powerful army, and they made sure it was loyal, exactly like Peter the Great had done, exactly what Louis XIV did. And so what they would do, think of early Mughal, they would go from town to town, district to district, and they would conscript or draft a certain number of children, of young boys from each district. One of the things that they would do is go out to the Christian parts of the empires, you know, in like Greece and Western Turkey and Eastern Europe, and they would take these Christian boys from a young age and raise them up to be Muslims. Some were trained to be soldiers. Others were educated and trained to be governors. They were brought up, fed and clothed and looked after by the emperor, so they were fanatically loyal to him. And there's a subsect of these soldiers known as the Janissaries, who were going to be your special forces guys of the ancient world. When the Janissaries showed up, they were legit. They were no games McGee. When you saw them, you knew that you were about to lose. And they stayed loyal and awesome for the better part of 500 years. And then in the 800s, they kind of helped destabilize and break up the Ottoman Empire. But they had, you know, as with everybody, you know, here's the Sultan. They got their special uniform with the Carolina blue pants and the red coat and the white sash. They were powerful. Now, Suleiman's sons and his descendants, kind of like the Chinese dynasties, there's good ones, even though they won this Hunger Games. Some of them were a little lazy. Some of them were corrupt. You know, my dad and grandpa did all the work, so I will leave it up to my assistants and my governors. And you know, with money and power comes corruption. There were also a series of famines, of agricultural failures. And so while the Ottoman Empire was probably more powerful than Europe, in kind of a downward turn in the Ottoman dynasty, is when Europe begins to pull ahead. The age of exploration, the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, and eventually the Industrial Revolution, where the Ottoman Empire kind of, you know, maintains its pace, Europe leaps forward. And so it's technology that is the difference. And so while the Ottoman Empire will last pretty much till the end of World War I, the empire slowly loses ground and territory to the expanding Europe. But at its height, this multi-ethnic, multi-religious, just, you know, beat my neighbor mowing his grass. The Ottoman Empire, the Sultan, the monarch, was equal to or superior to any monarch in the world at the time. An efficient, very strong, powerful empire. All right, tomorrow, guys, we are going to talk about Tokugawa Ieyasu in Japan, the national policy of seclusion. Then we'll finish it up with Ming Dynasty China. I'll do those trade routes. Keep an eye out for a rubric from me to help guide you on the AP exam. And we're almost done. All right, talk to you guys soon.